morning, updates coming in on Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Now, Sri Lanka's president has declared a state of emergency and it has given sweeping powers to security forces after it imposed a state of emergency in the country. This a day after hundreds tried to storm the president's house in anger over an unprecedented economic crisis. The emergency was declared for protection of public order and maintenance of supplies and services essential to the life of the community. My colleague Abhishek is joining us from the Mumbai newsroom. Abhishek, good morning. What more can you tell us with respect to the economic crisis that has crippled Sri Lanka for that matter, and now a state of emergency that has been declared in the country?
Yes, Samiksha. So we would like to tell our viewers that on the day when protesters stormed the house of Sri Lanka President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the Sri Lankan government has imposed an emergency in the island nation. The island nation has been hit by severe economic crisis and anger split on the streets. And on the day when protesters stormed the house of Sri Lankan president, later in the day, the Sri Lankan government imposed an emergency, saying that it is doing so to protect the rights and to protect essentials and to protect essential services, so that the people do not suffer. Now, interestingly, the step came after protests which is bound to raise further questions, but sweeping powers have been given to the state police in Sri Lanka to maintain law and order. However, the protests do not seem to simmer down, though they have gone down after the emergency was imposed. But the Sri Lankan president has been facing protests, and even his wife had gone to an event where protesters raised slogans. Arrests were also made. Yesterday, we got the report that the house of Sri Lankan president was attacked and that protesters also went violent during the protests. Arrests were made. About 50 people were arrested, and there were also reports of certain journalists as well as people injured when they were protesting outside the Sri Lankan president's house.
Yes. Well, thanks Abhishek for taking us through all those details. And here's a quick roundup of all that's making news from across the globe. NASA began its wet dress rehearsal of the Space Launch System at the Kennedy Space Center. The full rehearsal will run through various operations, including loading propellant into the rocket's tanks and conducting a full launch countdown as well. The rehearsal is scheduled to conclude on 3rd of April. The Axiom Mission 1 crew, which is the first private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, held a briefing ahead of the launch scheduled for 6th of April from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The crew will travel to the orbiting outpost aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft after launching on the company's Falcon 9 rocket. The United Nations says that the country's warring parties have accepted a 2-month truce. Starting with the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, the agreement was announced by United Nations Secretary General in New York. The pact comes after a significant escalation in recent weeks that saw several attacks by Yemen's rebel Houthis across the country's border to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Greece invited NATO partners and regional allies to take part in an annual Air Force exercise starting at Andromeda Air Base near the southern city of Kalmata. Greek Defense Minister said that the joint military drill sent a strong message of resolve at a time when Russia was invading Ukraine. The US ambassador to Greece said that the country's ability to bring NATO allies together was more important than ever right now.